The fact is that we are the people that we've been waiting for. But because our oppressors write all of our narratives, they've hidden that fact from us. As long as we continue to allow the white society to write our narratives, the narratives that we believe, we will remain forever mentally enslaved by the white society. We must instead start critically thinking for ourselves and based upon facts. Let's do so. Let's look at the facts as they truly are. In the U.S., over 83% of the over 55 million black people identify as being Christians. Globally, more than 1 billion black people identify as being Christians. Come on now, critically think. With that many black people praying to Jesus, why haven't our prayers been answered? And we've been praying for more than 400 years. And we continue doing so down generational lines, although our prayers continues to go unanswered. Given that the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again while expecting a different result, by that definition, it's therefore insane for us to continue going down the same path. Those of us who brings these facts to your attention are trying to free you from a mental prison that you don't even know you're trapped within. Certainly some of you are getting defensive, and many will say that people have the right to believe whatever they choose to believe. You know, usually people do have the right to believe whatever they choose to believe. However, there's a profound exception to this rule when it comes to the oppressed. The oppressed must gain a clear, concise, and accurate understanding of our plight and condition in order to liberate ourselves. Because if our understandings of our plight and condition are flawed, then all of our liberating strategies and remedies that stems from those flawed beliefs and understandings will also be flawed. This is why those of us who know the truth must teach African proverb. The absolute fact is that our plight has nothing to do with a biblical fairy tale written by our most ungodliest enemies, from a book that was brutally beaten into submission within the blood-soaked minds of our enslaved ancestors. The manner of how Christianity was originally brutally introduced to we Africans totally disqualifies it from containing the true words of God. Because an infallible God would never allow his words to be introduced to a people in such an ungodly manner. Moreover, the fact that the Bible strongly condones slavery also totally disqualifies it from containing the true words of God. To believe that God endorses slavery is a ridiculous belief. Those black people that insist on clinging to their Bibles, irrespectively of these noted facts to the contrary, does so because they've been brainwashed to act as wardens of their own mental prisons. And those of us who tell you the truth are trying to free you from a mental prison that you don't even know you're trapped within. The time of believing in falsehoods that literally insults our own intelligence is now over. The truth of our plight and condition is that black people are within a trauma-bonded relationship with a narcissistic white society. The term trauma-bonded relationship is usually associated with individual abusive relationships, wherein which an abused person is trauma-bonded to the narcissistic abuser. Here's how it's achieved. After repeatedly brutalizing a victim, the narcissistic abuser never acknowledges any of his wrongdoing. He instead minimizes the abuse and tells the victim that the abuse wasn't that bad and it was their fault or just get over it. He then constantly inundates the victim with demoralizing and disapproving narratives about the victim. This is continued until the victim stops focusing on the abuse that they endured and instead starts focusing only on the demoralizing and disapproving narratives. Therefore, rather than resenting the abuser for the abuse, the victim instead focusing only on the demoralizing and disapproving narratives, instead tries to win the approval of the abuser. This trauma bonded effect provides the abuser with a more favorable outcome from their victims rather than having their victims hating and resenting them for the abuse. It's a well-proven gaslighting tactic. Likewise, that same trauma bonding abusive manipulation tactic is what the white society has done to black people. After brutalizing black people for many centuries, the white society never acknowledged any of their horrible wrongdoings. They instead minimizes it, insist that black people abuse wasn't that bad and that we should just get over it. And in addition to these lies, they constantly inundate black people with black racially demoralizing and white disapproving narratives in the form of propaganda. This is continued until rather than appropriately resenting the white society for their horrific abuse of us throughout history, many black people instead focusing only on their black racially demoralizing and white disapproving propaganda, therefore instead seeks only to win the approval of the white society. Many black people will even go out of their way to try to show white people that we're not all bad. This is the truth of our plight and condition. Black people are within a trauma-bonded, abusive relationship with a narcissistic white society. And just like within most abusive relationships, the white abusers have convinced many of their black victims to believe that the abuse that we endured was our own fault. It's a psychological mind hack. The minds of targeted populations are quite easy to manipulate if they're unaware of what's being done to them. Once minds have been confused, manipulation becomes simple. The mind will even ignore common sense and rationality falls away, even overlooking hypocrisy and deception. Welcome to the real world. Now you know the truth of our plighted condition. Now you know the truth that's been hidden from you. You've been distracted by Bibles and Willie Lynch myth. The truth has finally come forward, but millions of black people have been conditioned to fear it and to hate those of us who speaks it. Millions also refuse to accept the truth because of the inherent call for action that comes with accepting the truth. But when you hear the truth and you know deep down within your heart and soul that it is the truth, and yet you still refuse to act upon it, it is then that your spirit begins to truly die. Because that very moment proves that you are in fact mentally enslaved by the white society. And don't be fooled. If the oppressors were truly superior, they wouldn't have to tell so many lies and distort so many facts in order to convey it, nor would they have to work so hard and unrelentingly behind the scenes to handicap those who they claim are inferior. It is time to wake up to our reality. What oppressive forces have created a prison for our minds. I'm showing you the door, but you're the one that has to walk through it. It's time to wake up.